Hey, Patrick.
Hey, MichaelJ.
Patrick, I am flipping out this week. Flipping out. Yeah. Flipping out over some of these flip cards.
That's exciting. Like, which ones in particular? From the upcoming Magic the Gathering expansion, Ixalan, Pirates versus Dinosaurs.
Pirates versus Dinosaurs versus, like, Merfolk also. And
Tangentially, Merfolk are involved. Vampires more so.
White vampires and green merfolk will battle it out. I was thinking maybe they might battle it out in the Sunken Ruin of Azcanta. So the first card I'm pretty excited to talk about is actually a legendary enchantment. It's 1 in a blue. Search for Azcanta. And it has the text, at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put it into your graveyard then. If you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform Search for Azcanta. It becomes a legendary land, Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, and which taps for blue. Or it has the ability, 2 in a blue, tap, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. What do you think about this guy?
Oh, hell yes.
Like, I like it so much. I think it's just gonna whiz bang 4 of in a bunch of different archetypes. Even though there's like substantial diminishing returns on drawing a second copy early, like it's real powerful, right?
Doesn't this card looks really... I'm not so sure that it's an automatic 4 of. It could easily be. It might just be. But I don't know. When I see this card, though, I am definitely on the page of this is freaking powerful.
Yeah.
So if we could, let's talk about this like 2 different cards. Because it is, right? Like it's both. And it is upside because the first card... transforming into the second is optional. So it's pure upside. And you can have 2 of them if they're out of sync.
Oh, wow. That is really strong. I didn't realize that initially.
Right. It's not all the other ones are like that. It's weird. But, okay, so Search for Azcanta starts off... Let's just look at the front side. We've seen in the past cards... that are in the space of being enchantments that cost 3, that are 2 in a blue, that are effectively at the beginning of your upkeep. You can look at the top card of your library. If you want, you can put it into your graveyard. So there have been versions of this for 3 that have never been good. But it's not that they're embarrassing. They've just never been quite good enough. For literally 2 mana, you're already doing something. That's already, like, worth considering because it wasn't clear that it was even a mana off of being good before. But wait, there's more. Much, much more. Because when you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform your enchantment that was effectively costing... Like, you played this 2 mana enchantment, right? Now you transform it into a legendary land that, in some ways, you have the option of cashing in your Search for Azcanta to have been sort of a weird rampant growth thing, right?
Yeah, that is true. It is kind of a weird rampant growth.
Which is particularly good for Approach of the Second Sun, because it's very easy to flip Search of Azcanta by turn 6. And the land is untapped already, so you're just a turn ahead of schedule of being able to play your Approach. But it's not just an island. It's literally an island that has... that's not an island at all. It's a land that has the ability to let you impulse over and over and over again. Now, you can't get land or creatures, but, like... That's okay. There are a lot of decks that have enchantments, instant sorceries, artifacts, and planeswalkers to choose from.
Like the Approach of the Second Sun's deck that you just referenced doesn't really have creatures, right? Like it could have creatures in the sideboard. Yeah,
right. You could even get cast out if you want. Like it's not just non-permanent, right? Like you're able to get something, just not creatures or land. The fact that you have this card drawing engine in play I mean, once you flipped it, it's more powerful than Library of Alexandria as a permanent.
So let's just parse a couple of things first. One of them, just you mentioned the approach of the Second Son's deck. The search for Azcanta, even if you don't flip it, or maybe you flip it into the rampant growth, that's useful. You could also have the enchantment side in play post your first casting of Approach to the Second Son, and it helps accelerate you to the next approach, right? Because it can just dig past cards.
But if you get to flip it, you can actually accelerate even faster.
But what if you had both, right? Like,
then you're already there.
Yeah, that's a thing. That's one, and then just separately, like I was saying before, it's so cheap. It's so cheap, and there's two implications on the front side that I think are worth mentioning. One of them is this is like a passive way to not just fix your next draw, which is, I think, the ostensible thing to do here, but if you have like a fatty on top, this is like an easy way to just not draw cards that you don't want to have in your hand that you would rather have in another zone, like your library or perhaps graveyard. Like, you just dump uncastables into your graveyard. They don't go into your hand, so you get a better quality of draw. But if you're playing like certain Lilianas or other reanimation spells, this is a setup guy for it.
Right. I mean, this also combos with Eternalize, right?
Yeah.
And of course, any of those different type of folks. But like, if you even just like Honored Hydra, right? Like any of the graveyard interactions. But I don't know. I think that the use of this as library manipulation, advantage over time, almost like a Sensei's Divining Top fetch land thing over time. The fact that you can flip it into like a card advantage engine that quickly takes over the game. It produces extra mana. It's
very
it's a powerful
Sensei's
thing to
Divining
untap.
Top-ish.
It's also a powerful permanent to untap. Like if we end up with like that old Kiora could like untap land. This is like a land that actually is like relevant to untap in a big way, depending on what permanents, what kind of untap engines we happen to end up finding ourselves with.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's basically. Like, it's 4 total, right? It's 2 in a blue, and then you tap the Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin itself, so that's 4 total. It's basically like a Jame Day tome by itself, right? Like that, except for more powerful of an effect, because it has selection, not just the top card of your library.
It's more efficient than Jame Day, because Jame Day requires 4 plus itself.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and Search Scare Azcanta did stuff for you. The other thing that I think is important to note about it is it's real easy to cheat, right? Like, it's not like you have to wait through 7 turns of, or, maybe more than 7 turns of grinding with the Search for Azcanta. Because, if you just cast some kind of, I'm going to say cathartic reunion, but I think you take my meaning, just some kind of strategic planning that just helps get junk into your graveyard, it will accelerate how quickly the Search for Azcanta will transform itself into Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin.
Well, and there's ways to abuse it, too. You were speaking of cheating. You can cheat the other way with it, though, too, where you're, like, for instance, if you use Renegade Rallier, you can actually get it back, right? Which is notable because, like, Search for Azcanta, you might be, like, flipping, and you're like, well, I don't need another Search for Azcanta. I'm going to put it into my graveyard, right? Mm-hmm. But then when you flip it, you could be like, well, I want to have Renegade Rallier get me back the other one. Or even if you just flip a second one and Legend Rule, the fact that you can, like, actually get it back as an enchantment, because then you can have one going as the enchantment and one going as the land. And it is a permanent. When it's in your graveyard, it's that enchantment that costs 1 in a blue, so it is an eligible target for Renegade Rallier to get back, since it costs 2 or less.
I think this is a super cool flip card. But the other ones are also pretty cool, some of them.
Well, and also one last thing about it, though, is that it's an enchantment, so it's not vulnerable to the artifact destruction like a Braids and Dissenter's Deliverance or whatever, and it's not vulnerable to the Planeswalker kill like direct damage and the various kill a Planeswalker type cards. So it has some durability in a world now saturated with anti-artifact and anti-Planeswalker cards.
That's a great point.
But yeah, you want to take a look at some of the other ones of this cycle?
Oh, yeah, I think the white one is really, really good. Like
Legion's Landing. It's white for a legendary enchantment. When Legion's Landing enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. And when you attack with 3 or more creatures, period, not just vampires, 3 or more creatures, transform Legion's Landing. And as a flipped card, it's a legendary land that has tap. So it's Azcanta, the first fort. Tap for a white, or tap and pay 2 and a white to create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink.
So basically, it's just the front side of what's that? Sacred Cat? Is that the name of it?
Yeah.
Front side is it's actually just a playable card, just in and of itself, right? Like maybe not the most exciting card, a 1/1 lifelink for 1, but you know, Sacred Cat sees some play. This could certainly see some play just in and of itself in a deck of a certain kind of constituency. It's so easy to flip. Like that's the thing that's crazy about this. How many, you just play this on turn 1, how many ways are there to get 2 creatures into play on turn 2 or 3 with a single card? There's just innumerable token producers, whatever you want to do, to get them to play. You attack, flip into Azcanta, the first fort. This is this is an impossibly powerful card once it's flipped, right? Like, think about
impossibly, that's hyperbolic.
Right. Like, think about how dominating cards from Keldron Outpost to Voodoo Guys of the City Tree to most recently, Ormondal's original home, the Westvale Abbey. Every one of those cards has been highly successful in Standard when legal in Standard, if not part of the best deck, right? Counterpost, Ghazi Glare, various versions of decks that were popping out Ormondal. This is such a powerful card. Its token is insane. It's way better than the tokens that are generated by most of the cards of this kind of land that we're talking about. But basically, they all made some kind of 1/1 like Saproling or Soldier or whatever. But this one has lifelink.
So Azcanta, the first fort, I think that compared to Keldron Outpost, if we just put them side by side and disregard what it takes, like Keldron Outpost requiring a sacrifice of a plains.
Yep.
Even if we disregard all that stuff, when they're actually in play, and disregard the legendary land thing, but when they're actually in play, this is almost as strong, and depending on the format, it could be stronger. I think that efficiency-wise, Keldron Outpost, if we completely disregard the extra land, would be slightly more efficient, but you can't. It's like you are actually spending the extra land every single turn. So it's actually the same mana efficiency as a Keldron Outpost, because the Keldron Outpost only costs 2 in tap, but you also had lost that other land. This one just doesn't require you to be down a land all the turns you actually tap it for mana. But what's more is that you're not getting this as a land for a card with this drawback. You're getting this as a bonus upside from a card that already gave you a 1/1 lifelink vampire for 1 mana.
Yeah, the other thing is, like, if you just draw multiple Legion's Landing, for sake of argument, right? You just, like, laid them out there like they were...
The point being that this is much better than Keldron Outpost. Sorry.
They were just dudes, right? Like, you're putting the enchantment in the graveyard or legendary enchantment in the graveyard. It doesn't matter because you keep the guy, right? So it's like an Oath of Nissa, right? If you play a second Oath of Nissa, the first one in the graveyard, whatever, you still get the functionality of it in play, like the ability to...
Yeah, but it is a 1/1 lifelink. It's not like that's like the most insane game piece ever.
It's not the most insane, piece of material you could have, but it's also only a single white. It's highly redundant in a deck that you want to be in a situation where you have enough guys out that you can just attack with all of them, right, to flip it. But the other thing is, even if you accidentally flip a Legion's Landing into an Azcanta, like you said, this one, you don't get to choose, right? You have to flip it. It's okay. If you got even 1 token out of the first Azcanta, it paid for itself on the flip back. It's actually, I think, like, very little downside, and it seems so powerful to me. Like, one of the things that's great about it is the kind of deck that can easily flip Legion's Landing potentially could be vulnerable to sweepers or something, but you just already have a token producer in play for, like, just, all right, I'm going to have, like, 1 or 2 guys attacking you right after I untap from your sweeper. I love it.
The biggest thing that makes it different than Keldron Outpost is that Keldron Outpost can do it all by itself. Legion's Landing, it's like it might be better than Keldor Outpost, but you got to be somebody honest. You got to be actually playing with some cards that were meant to attack.
Sure.
And that's not a huge cost these days,
Yeah.
but that's just an important distinction, I think, between them.
Yeah, to be fair, Keldor Outpost was played both in like white-blue control decks, where it was oftentimes the only way to win, and also in maybe like white mid-range or white weenie decks. And those decks obviously had very, very different outlooks on how they would use the card. This card is only going to work in a deck that has some amount of creature support for it, whether it's tokens or even planeswalker support or something. You have to do something legitimate, and it's a spell, right? Like Keldor Outpost, it was just a land, right? You have to do
something vaguely legitimate. I'm not sure you need to do something legitimate, because you could also do some, like, there are various at the end of the day, you could just attack with some tokens because you have some cards that make tokens. I don't know. Like, if you attack with a Whirler Virtuoso and a Thopter and this Vampire, you're already there. I don't know. Like, the line isn't super hard to cross of how much you need here in order to trigger this. But I don't know. I'm not so positive that, even though this card is like very exciting, I'm not so positive that this is what the format is going to be about. It might be. The card looks promising and exciting. But, like, so did Kithion, right? Like, this kind of a card, it's really going to depend on what the rules of engagement for the format really are.
Oh, yeah, this is very, very similar to Kithion. I would agree. But
it would shock me if the blue card, if Search for Azcanta didn't find a home, it would be really surprising to me.
I think because it's going to be one of the dominating cards, personally.
This card might be a dominating card, it might be decent, and it might actually just be wrong in the format. But it might be great. I think we got to see what else is going on. What's the value of all the life linkers? How does this fit into, like, your horse tribal? How does this fit into vampire tribal? Is this part of some token-based deck? Is this is an enchantment that has a lot of meaning. So that, like, what was that card that's like 2 and a green and you get like an enchantment and a creature from your top 5 cards?
Not Gifted the Gargantuan.
No. But, like, it just came out relatively recently. Anyway, the point is that I think that we're going to see we're going to have to see what all support there is for this type of thing, but I'm interested. I don't know if we have to see for Search. I mean, I think with Search we will see. But I think with this card, I'm interested. Let's put it that way. I want to subscribe to the newsletter, but I'm not ready to make a lifetime guarantee yet.
I can respect that. I'd say, like, one of the dominating decks in Standard right now is, like, Mono Red Aggro, and the last thing that a Mono Red Aggro deck with cards like Earthshaker Kenra and Bomat Courier wants to see is this guy on turn 1.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. So they play this card on turn 1.
Yeah.
And then they start playing some haste creatures. They've got Bomat Couriers and Kenra Earthshakers and Uncrop Crashers.
The white player deck plays this on turn 1. You either have to do something, but you're not going to run your Bomat Courier into it.
No, I'm saying you're putting this card in your red deck.
Oh, no. I'm saying the last thing the red deck wants to see.
No, they want to see this. This is the first thing they want to see.
Oh,
they want to see it in their opening hand.
Play it themselves.
Yes, they want to see it in their opening hand. They want that to be the first thing they see.
I see what you're saying. So you're like Legion's Landing on the first turn, then Earthshaker Kenra, third turn Oddcrop Crasher, and I've got my engine. And it's just like you were saying with the blue one, it's also a rampant growth.
Remember, you don't. No. You don't need to play this on turn 1, though. You play your more aggressive cards, because if you play this card on turn 2 or 3, it has haste. Not 2, more like 3. You play this as a 1-drop on turn 3, and your Bomat Courier or your Earthshaker Kenra. Like, if you just played a 1-drop and then a 2-drop, if you play Legion's Landing on turn 3 and an Earthshaker Kenra, you can flip it immediately.
Oh, but you could also do just like...
And then you get a mana discount.
First turn, Legion's Landing. Second turn, Carry Zev. Third turn, attack with Carry Zev, the monkey, and the
you're missing it. Why are you playing Legion's Landing on turn 1?
Because I'm saying in this situation, it would curve out so that you would have 5 mana or 4 mana on turn 3. That's pretty good.
Yeah, okay, yeah, you can do that if you want to have 4 mana on turn 3. I don't know if there's any point anymore. I mean, Chandra at the end of the day is a pretty good thing. But what I mean is the ability to use this with haste is pretty sick, because if you do this on turn 3, you still have 4 mana. You're just not having 4 mana for one card.
I'm convinced. I'm convinced.
You know, you can play 2 of these too. Anyway, so this one's going to be an exciting one to work with. What do you think of Argul's Bloodfast, which is 1 and a black legendary enchantment? You can pay 1 and a black and pay 2 life to draw a card. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 5 or less life, you can transform Argul's Bloodfast, which turns into a temple of Aklazats. Temple of Aklazats.
It's like a Temple of Azkaban. Okay, got it.
Right. So, and it taps for a black, and it also tap and sacrifice a creature to gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness.
So the backside looks maybe like superior to Mirror in the Moaning Well, which is a pretty insane card in its day. But the front side to get there, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of this to start with. It's kind of greedish. Kind of
it's sort of greedish. So it's like greed. It's 1 mana cheaper for the first card.
But then after
it's
that,
neutral on the second card. By the third card, it has cost you more than greed. And you don't get to flip it until you're at 5 or less life. And when you're at 5 or less life, that is a really good time for a better Mirror in the Moaning Well.
But it's like not even like thematically, in line with Arguel's Bloodfast, other than, man, my life total is low. Like, man, I could sure do for a Mirror in the Moaning Well. Like,
well, yeah, because then you get your life back up.
Yeah, I don't know.
And then you get to sacrifice all those extra creatures that you drew.
But I might have drawn some extra creatures, but I certainly didn't cast them because I was spending all my mana on the overcosted greed ability.
Yeah, we'll see. This card, I'm not super optimistic of. It's got some chances. No, it's fine. I mean, it's some things that you might want to do. I mean, obviously, paying life to draw cards can be useful. This doesn't look like an incredibly efficient way to do that.
Well,
spending 2 mana to draw a card, like spending 2 mana and 2 life to draw a card in a world of cycling and cantrips and anticipates and ops and all these different cards. There's so many ways to spend your mana. You could be playing with instant speed Brain Geyser. There's so many ways to spend your mana efficiently. Argul's Bloodfast doesn't strike me as the most appealing way to do that.
I'll even argue against myself on this one. What if you play it in the sideboard against like a kind of a low pressure or no pressure opponent? Example, you play this, just land this on the second turn on the play against Approach of the Second Sun's control deck, right? Like, this is going to destroy them, right? They put no pressure on you for damage, so you could really just draw, I don't know, 8 cards or something with this, and then you're just going to have
You're talking about 18 mana later.
Yeah, but like you can just meet it out, right? Like, it's going to help you ensure your land drops.
What are they doing with the 18 mana that they're not spending on this?
I'm sorry. The player who has, in my hypothetical, the Argul's Bloodfast?
No. Okay, so meanwhile, while Argul's Bloodfast player spends 18 mana and draws a bunch of cards, they draw 8 extra cards, right? 7 extra, really, but then they get this temple, the Temple of Azkaban, right? So they have spent 18 mana doing that stuff. Meanwhile, the Approach of the Second Sun's player, what did they spend their 18 mana on?
Also drawing cards.
Like, for instance, they spend 4 mana, and then they Glimmer of Genius. Right? They spend 2 mana and they anticipate. They spend 7 mana and they approach of the Second Sons. They spend 2 mana and they search for Azcanta. Like, I assume they're doing some things. Put this card next to search for Azcanta.
Yeah,
Being able to, like, look at a top card and you may discard it if you want every turn is a way better effect than paying 2 life and 2 mana to draw a card. And then flipping search for Azcanta, basically flip if you don't stop it. You have but to will it. Whereas
it becomes an insane card. That's the thing. It's like actually flips into one of the best lands you can imagine.
And better than I can imagine. It's better than Library of Alexandria in play. And it flips at will. This is inverted from the Temple of Azkaban in 2 important ways. The Temple of Azkaban, in order to flip it, you have to lose the game very nearly. Additionally, once you flip it, you get a card that would be the 17th best land.
I literally said I'm going to argue against myself. I don't know. I was trying to find a place where we might want to play this.
No, we might play it, dude. It's still an enchantment that generates some card advantage. And every deck's blue. And it's fine. It's really sweet if you can control magic effects. Like if you use this with Threaten because you're getting down there. And if there's some way to pay a bunch of your life at once, you know, like, oh, I ad nauseum'd my life all the way down, and then I can go back up with Temple. It does enough novel stuff that I think it's got chances to be. It's just, I don't think you want to do this one straight up. I think it's going to take extremely narrow, weird. It's going to take an extremely narrow, weird interaction, or a sideboard for a very fringe scenario, like a very unusual world.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it would be sweet in a threatened deck. We haven't seen one since in a while.
Threatens or threatened deck?
Like a threatened deck, right? Like we actually had all the tools for a threatened deck on the red side, but we lacked the tools on the black side. So, you know, this because it's kind of only okay to threaten people if you can't kind of chomp on their stuff after you've taken it away.
It's real hard to rely on a threatened strategy where you have to get down to 5 life or less and let them have a creature in play. Like it's like.
Well, I mean, there's Karyzev's Expertise, right, which is a good threaten. And
well, there's the new one, Captivating Crew.
You can just dump it.
Captivating Crew is 3 in a red for a 4/3 human pirate that has just the pumpable ability. 3 in a red, gain control of target creature and opponent controls until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. Activate this ability only anytime you can play a sorcery. We sail, we plunder, then we dance.
That's a very interesting permanent in play. I think it's also a lightning rod, a lightning strike rod. You think that one's good, Captivating Crew?
Well, it's definitely a worse Yasova or whatever.
Oh, that Teamer guy?
Yeah. It's like Yasova, but worse.
Much worse. But much more mana.
No, 1 more.
I'm a huge fan of like there was the Eldrazi that did this, and then there was the 3/3 haste guy that did this. You just cost 5, and then you take it immediately versus 4+4 for 8 total and not haste. But I don't know. I could see this card being okay. Like if you're playing against a creature removal poor deck that has like sweet fatties, this actually is probably insane. But
maybe.
But I mean, it requires you having so much operating mana and time, so maybe they'd beat you up.
You know, if your opponent has I don't know. It's just not worth it. Growing Rights of Itlimak. Man, I'm going to have to work on these.
Itlimak?
Growing Rights of Itlimak. It's 2 and a green for a legendary enchantment. When Growing Rights enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them, put it in your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, transform Growing Rights. So, when you first play it, you get to look at the top 4 cards of your deck and get a creature. So you're impulsing for a creature and you're spending 3. But then you end up getting to flip it if you have all you need is 4 creatures in play, which is weirdly similar but not quite the same as the white one. But anyway, if you have 4 creatures, you flip it and you get a Gaia's Cradle.
Just a Gaia's Cradle.
No, it can also tap for a green if you have no creatures.
This card is, I think, obviously quite powerful, right? So 2 and a green.
Is it?
2 and a green to impulse for a creature is probably not good enough in and of itself, right? Like, we've seen cards like this that are impulse for a creature and something else. Like, is it gift to the Gargantuan?
But this is a gift. This is a gift to the Gargantuan. Only it's just you always get Gaia's Cradle.
Yeah, but it's I would say I think it's pretty powerful. It's easy to set up 4 creatures. It quote unquote replaces itself with your looking for a creature ability, and then once it's flipped, there's like no downside. Like it still taps for G if you don't have a guy in play, and if you have multiple guys in play, it's awesome.
The fact that you flipped it implies there's 4 guys in play.
Yeah, but it's like they might kill all your guys or something.
Right, but it effectively has haste, right? Like, it's only happening in your end step, but as soon as you do this, if you have a haste creature, you're in business immediately, right?
A flash creature, you mean?
Yeah, a flash creature.
Yeah.
You're in business immediately.
I mean, you could also use it for, like, other effects other than casting a creature. So you have an active Gaia's Cradle on your opponent's turn or your end step. Like, if you need to put this through an artifact or, some other kind of activation cost, you can do that.
And I guess part of it is the implication that, like, okay, so picture you have Samut, for instance. If you play this card on turn 4, it is very reasonable to think that you, like, if your deck was sufficiently cheap, like if you're playing an Accelerator on turn 2 and you played 2 creatures on turn 3 and you've got a 1-draw, I don't know. I could imagine a deck that could play this on turn 4 and play Samut in the same turn. I don't know. It's the implied 4, like getting to use the Gaia's Cradle immediately. That seems to me where that is a pretty good chunk of power, and you don't have to be so turbo, but that's like part of it. And then the other part of it is the fact that this is a super duper 2-for-1 if you're actually reliably creating that game state.
Sure. Yeah, I think that of the 4 flip cards we talked about so far, and the red one isn't revealed yet. Is that correct?
Not that I know of.
They are 3 of them. I think are pretty exciting to very exciting, and the black one I don't like very much. That's my current assessment.
I like the blue one meaningfully better than the others. I think the green one and the white one are good. They needed the right home. Both of them could easily not have the right home. I don't think it would. It would be surprising for Azcanta to not have a home. What do you think about the Dowsing Dagger, which is the artifact equipment that transforms into Lost Veil? Dowsing Dagger is an equipment that when it enters the battlefield, target opponent creates 2/0/2 green plant creature tokens with Defender. And the equipped creature gets +2/+1. And whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may transform Dowsing Dagger, and it has an equip cost of 2.
So, it costs 2 to play it, and as soon as you play it, you get
your opponent
gets 2/02 guys. Oh,
and then if you pay 2 to equip your guy and give your guy +2/+1, and if you hit your opponent a single time, you can transform it into Lost Veil, and Lost Veil is a land, not legendary, by the way.
Just
it's a land that taps for 3 mana of any one color.
So it becomes like a kind of a Black Lotus. Is that Lotus Veil? Was that a land that did
Lotus Veil, right. Yeah, it becomes a Lotus Veil.
Man, I think like the cost of giving them 2/02s is pretty steep at 2 mana.
What if all your guys fly and have evasion?
That would that would dramatically reduce the downside, and it would also make it easier to hit somebody with the Dowsing Dagger. But like, obviously when it's flipped, it's a very, very powerful land when it's flipped.
Right, like if you go on, and this is, Magical Christmas Land where your opponent's not killing your 1/1 or whatever, but if you just play your Siren Storm Tamer on turn 1, and then on turn 2 play this equipment, turn 3 you equip your guy, hit him, and you immediately flip it, and now you have 4 mana available, and on turn 4 you'll have 8 mana. I don't know, it's kind of interesting.
The thing is, like, it's not ambiguous to me that you would want to have a Lost Veil in play, or multiple Lost Veils because it's not legendary. Just the question is, how steep is that cost set on the dagger side? I think it's very steep.
See, I don't think the 0/2 plant thing is the biggest thing. It limits who uses this. I think the bigger thing is the fact that at the end of the day, you need a creature that threatens to actually get through, and you need to spend 2, and you need to equip it. And then even after you do all this, now you don't have the equipment anymore. Right, what about a Braid, man? Like
they can just shut you down.
Like you equip your Dowsing Dagger to something, and then they just abrade it. Now you spent 4 mana, made an awkward attack, and then they also just have 2 plants. It's not like they're not doing something with the plants, potentially. What if they put +1/+1 counters on their guys?
Yeah, I actually think that the opponent's deck is a big, important chunk of how valuable the O2 plants might be. I mean, what if they have, like, I don't know, something that sacrifices creatures to gain more power, and that's part of their strategy, or like gain mana, that's part of their strategy. Like, you don't necessarily know that before you sit down at the table and you put this in your deck.
Yeah. Counterpoint, though, this plus Toolcraft Exemplar. Yeah?
It certainly turns on Toolcraft Exemplar.
Oh, yeah.
I have a different flipping artifact that I think seems awesome. Like, really awesome. And I don't know. Maybe you'll agree with me. Maybe you'll talk me down. Thaumatic Compass. It's 2 mana for a rare artifact. Just nothing fancy. 2 mana rare artifact, but it has the ability 3 and a tap. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 7 or more lands, transform Thaumatic Compass. It becomes Spires of Orazka, Spires of Orazka, sorry, which is a land, not a legendary land, mind you. It has 2 abilities, one of which is just tap for a colorless, and the other one is untap, target attacking creature an opponent controls, and remove it from combat. So it becomes better than Maze of Ith when it flips.
No, you can't do it to your own guys.
How does that come? Like, does that come up very often that you would want to?
Yeah, you can Maze of Ith your own guys. Yeah. Yeah, you attack with 3 guys, and you Maze of Ith the one they block.
Okay, I got you.
I realize Maze of Ith doesn't come up in Standard too much these days, but...
Well, I was thinking it would be better.
Tapping for a mana is pretty sweet.
That's what I was thinking. So, like, Thaumatic Compass, it doesn't do anything the turn it comes into play. So, it's 5 mana.
It does if you have 5 and no need, no feeling of wanting to defend yourself whatsoever.
Well, if you play this on turn 6 or turn 5 or whatever, you have 5 land in play, and you use it, play your 7th land, flip it, and it defends itself immediately. Right, also gives you an 8th land. But it's a self-contained card advantage engine. Nobody's saying this is the best thing to play against Earthshaker Kenner on the 2nd turn, but this is like a hellacious card against a creature poor control deck, right? Like think about like any of these control decks that rely on a relatively small number of attackers. Like let's say the only thing they have to win is like 3 or 4 torrential Gear Hulks and some creature lands, right? Like, just drawing Thaumatic Compass and playing it on the 2nd turn is horrible for them. It's a card advantage engine. You're going to get land drops every turn, and then once it flips, you like invalidate their offense. They're forced to play multiple cards, which, depending on your archetype, maybe that means that they're playing into a Wrath. Maybe that means they're playing into some other sort of, card advantage situation for you. Or like how synergistic this could be with Gideon of the Trials.
Out of curiosity, would you be so overjoyed by Journeyer's Kite?
Obviously, it's similar to Journeyer's Kite, but
very similar.
But Journeyer's Kite didn't have the Spires of Orazca endpoint. To be fair, Journeyer's Kite also saw some constructed play.
I'm not saying it didn't.
Kai Buddha himself was the last person I saw tapping one.
But so this was, and that gives you an idea how long it's been since Journeyer's Kite was good.
Sure.
This is an artifact. This is a Journeyer's Kite that has upside or downside depending on if you consider Spires of Orazca to be better or worse to have than the kite in the first place.
The kite. I mean, it's arguable that you just want to have the kite keep going in some decks.
Right.
And also, to be fair, I believe Kai had Sensei's Divining Top in his kite deck, which means that he was getting not just the card advantage of searching his library for lands, but also the shuffle for the top, which is very meaningful.
Yeah, he was also playing it in a format that was like Kamigawa block constructed.
It was not like Kamigawa block constructed. It was exactly 2/3 of Kamigawa block constructed. It wasn't
that's
even
how
the
much
third
like
set.
it was.
Yeah.
Right. So when you have 5 sets instead of 2, the bar is often going to be higher.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of main deck abrades and stuff. I don't know.
There's main deck abrades and main deck Dissenter's Deliverance and main deck Cast Out.
Right.
All those jazz.
So, I don't know, man. Thematic Compass, I would enjoy playing with the card. It doesn't look that good to me, though.
Really?
It's fine. It doesn't look that bad. It's fine, I guess, if you're in the market for this. It's just that card advantage engines are a dime a dozen. Is this even better than Treasure Map? Treasure Map is that one that, 2 mana that you can tap and pay 1 and scry 1. We talked about this before, but after you scry 3 times, you get a land that can tap for a colorless, or you can tap and sacrifice a treasure to draw a card. Oh, and you also get 3 treasures.
Well, and it's substantially less mana investment to do those things than Thematic Compass.
Right, well, so Thematic Compass costs 5 to get your first land. By the time you spend 5 on the treasure map, it flips, and now you have 3 treasures which are better than Black Lotus together, and you have a Treasure Cove, and Treasure Cove in play lets you convert your Lotus Petals into you can cycle your Lotus Petals if you want, or you could just have it be a land, so it's just it's another card.
The first land that Thematic Compass gets you has like a general retail value of G, right? Like a Lay of the Land is not.
No, man. Spoiler: stock man isn't real. Sorry. No, yeah, sure. It costs a G.
So it's slightly overpriced from that perspective. But I think that Spires of Orazca is a really powerful thing to have in some matchups.
Yeah, of course. That's just not yes. And a Treasure Cove and 3 treasures is a powerful. What do you normally want in play? The Spires of Orazca or the Treasure Cove and 3 treasures?
I think it depends, right? Like
in general, which one is giving you more of an impact on the board?
I think that Treasure Cove and 3 treasures is more.
Okay, so Treasure Map costs 5 to do all that. Thematic Compass only costs 2 if you never use the card. But it costs 5 to do even once. And if you do it even once, you have a land to show for it. What would you rather have? Scry 1 3 times or the 4th land?
I feel like I've already won if I've scryed 1 3 times and I get like 5 free mana or something.
Four immediately. You have three Lotus Petals and a Treasure Cove.
I feel like Dennis Bentley at U.S. Nationals 1996, when people were like, "You have no way to remove your own Necropotes," and he's like, "If I drew 10 extra cards and I don't win the game, it's my fault."
So I don't know, man. Thaumatic Compass might be better. I don't know. The Standard hasn't been the way that it would take for Thaumatic Compass to really excite me. It hasn't been that way in a little while. It just feels like Standard's about something different. Although who knows? Maybe the rotation. Of course, we haven't even spoken on Primal Amulet yet. 4-cost instant and sorcery spells cost you 1 less to cast, and when you cast an instant or sorcery, put a charge on it, Primal Amulet, and if there's 4 or more charges, you can flip it into a land that taps for mana of any color. And if the mana is spent to play an instant or sorcery, literally freaking fork it.
I mean, the only question is the initial cost of 4. Like, how daunting is the initial cost of 4? Because once that card is in play, like, you are live, right? Like, it has an awesome ability, whether or not you ever flipped it.
Well, and by the time you flipped it, in theory, assuming you've been playing cards that cost 2, but by the time you flip it, it's paid for itself in theory if everything's going well.
Oh, I was actually thinking about this as a kind of card that could discount fairly expensive cards, but you're right, it's probably better to just discount cheap cards.
Right, like if you use Primal Amulet, if you play a Primal Amulet, let's just imagine that somehow you just get to untap, no problem. If you just play 4 cards, like if you're like Anticipate, Strategic Plannings, Cathartic Reunion, Tormenting Voice, whatever, you flip it immediately.
And it flips into a land that even if you're tapped out, now you have a land you could just like opt and it's double opt, right? Like that's a low end thing you can do.
It flips into sort of like a Mirari that costs 4 less to use.
It feels like it flips into a Pyromancer's Ascension, right? A fully loaded Pyromancer's Ascension.
You only get to do it once. You only get to copy fair. 1 spell a turn.
I don't know. It's like a land, not a legendary land. Like, this is a really... Like, I'm just not sure if the forecasting cost on the front side of that artifact is... If that's not too high of a bar, everything else about the card is really, really great.
Well, I don't know, man. The forecasting cost wouldn't be too high of a bar if everything about the card was even greater. Right? Like, that's kind of a weird... Like, It's weird to just say the card is good enough, assuming that it's good enough. Right? Like, so, is the card good enough?
Well, what I mean to communicate is, I'm not sure if you can survive the 4, right? Like,
survive the 4. I mean, so for instance, if instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 2 less to cast, it would be even more likely that it would be good enough despite the 4 cost, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's just a more powerful ability.
Well, that's my point, is that the ability is the value of the ability is the value of the ability is whatever the ability is. The cost is what the cost is. It's weird to say that the ability is good enough. The only question is, can we afford the cost? Because it's not about can we afford the cost. We could afford the cost very easily if the ability was good enough.
Or I guess you find a way, right, if the ability is good.
You would pay for it one way or the other. You would use cards to let you survive, right?
Yeah.
Like, if it flipped into a card that tapped to draw 7 cards, you'd be willing to make a lot of sacrifices to enable it.
Yeah, exactly 6 cards worth of sacrifices I would be willing to make.
Well, I don't know. There's also all the mana and blah, blah, blah. All right, what about Conqueror's Galleon, which is the vehicle, the 2/10 split here? It's Conqueror's Galleon. When it attacks, exile it at the end of combat, then return it to the battlefield transformed under your control, and the crew cost is 4. And when it transforms, it's a land that taps for a colorless, or you can tap it and pay 2 to draw a card, then discard a card, or you can tap it and pay 4 to draw a card, or you can tap it and pay 6 to return target card from your graveyard to your hand.
I like it because its flip cost is really simple. It's a
Ever attack?
Yeah, it's not a toughie. It's an expensive card to cast and an expensive card to crew. Once it flips, I'm dubious about how good it's going to be the first turn that it flips, but this is a great card to have flipped if you're going to play, several more turns.
Great relative to what?
Like, just, it's a resource that I would love to have if I knew the game was going to go X number more turns.
Like if you, for instance, would you spend 8 to have that permanent? Like 4 plus 4?
Not at one shot. No, probably not.
No, 4 plus 4. Like 4 on one turn and then 4 on the next turn.
I mean, I think it would depend. Right? Like, I wouldn't pay 8 against Earthshaker Kenra. I would pay 8 against Approach the Second Sons.
Because, like, your crew of 4 is not that dissimilar to having to spend 4 mana.
Oh, yeah. It's expensive on both ends.
And you have to invest 8 and then have it attack and live. And it's not that hard for it to live, given it's a 2/10, but it does have to live. So a Braid or whatever, any kind of kill spell, and you've lost your 8 mana and have nothing to show for it. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I want to see. It seems surprising that this would be good, but maybe. It certainly looks like, I mean, when I look at it through the lens of would I like to have a Conqueror's Foothold in play? Sure. I would love to have a land that just lets me loot. Like it's just a Jalum Tome and a Jayemdae Tome, and I can just literally buy, if I ever want, my Jayemdae Tome can be assured of drawing a regrowth. It just seems like those are a bunch of things that I would like if I got them at a good rate, but this rate I'm not sure is so good. It would be a function of how much can we exploit the quirks of vehicles, like, the vehicle synergies and the fact that it's a crew 4, so making an efficient crew and crewing a thing that had summoning sickness anyway, and can we possibly use Conqueror's Galleon without actually crewing it and crewing it with one of those cards that cheats the crew cost in some way. I don't know, man. I just think that when you're going to all the trouble of crewing a vehicle and you need a big crew and you need an expensive artifact that doesn't have an immediate impact on the board, whatever strategy that is less likely to take advantage of a land that functions as a Jalum Tome and a Jayemdae Tome that can buy regrowths if you want. Maybe. It's weird because that's a lot of things that don't normally work well together.
All right. I think you've convinced me at least to be less enthusiastic about
No, I don't want you to be less enthusiastic. I just want you to show your work.
All right. Yeah, I didn't show you. I was just thinking like, hey, this seems like a cool thing to have in play. Can we try to make the front ends work? But you're right. Like, I think the constituent of your deck to get the front half to work just might be inconsistent with the second half, right? Like,
exactly.
The second half doesn't want to do the same things as the front half.
Right. That's exactly my issue with the card. What do you think of Fell Flagship, though, on the vehicle front, which is the 3-cost one that's a 3/3 pirates you control, get +1/+0, and whenever Fell Flagship deals combat damage to a player, they discard a card, and it's got a crew of 3. Doesn't flip or anything, but it is a anthem that sits in play for your pirates, which helps make it easier to crew the flagship. And the flagship itself is a disrupting specter of sorts when it hits them,
It seems like it should have some applications, right? So 3 casting costs for a one-sided crusade has been a thing that people did before, right? Like with Glorious Anthem. If you have your deck built the correct way to take advantage of Fell Flagship, it should just be like that, on its lonesome. If you have just a ton of pirates, this is good. Like you said, like a 2x pirate can crew it because of its own text. And unopposed, this card seems like it would really be, could be really meaningful in a strategy, and especially against people who aren't very good at blocking.
Well, and it's interesting that it gives +1 makes it crew very efficiently with pirates, right? Like your Fathom Fleet Captain is a 2-1, but if you just play this the turn after, you're getting a 3-1 out of the deal.
Yeah.
And then you can use that 3 to crew this thing. And it can give your pirate strategy some resiliency to sweepers.
Resiliency to sweepers because your next pirate's going to be a little stronger than it should be.
Well, and this thing is a vehicle, like the vehicle sitting in play doesn't get destroyed by sorcery speed sweeper.
You could just play like a 2x pirate, immediately crew, and then like bash them for a card in hand when they tap out.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yep.
That's cool.
Plus, it's an artifact, so our unlicensed disintegrations turn on, our Spire of Industry turns on. You know, our Toolcraft Exemplar, if somehow our pirate deck has that going.
You never know. I mean, maybe you have more than one synergy. I can actually, having more than one synergy might actually just diminish both synergies, right?
I don't know, man. I think Fell Flagship looks good to me. It doesn't look great, but it looks pretty good, and it might be great if the pirates need this sort of thing. They're a little glutted at expensive cards, but
it's better part of the way there for an Anthem for the cost. Like, I think that's okay.
Yeah. I think this card looks good, and I think that the wild card is what mana looks like, because between all these different treasures and Spire of Industry and Aether Hub and possibly Unclaimed Territory, there's a lot of weird, like, dude, I don't know. You might just be, like, pirates might be able to just play 5 colors, man.
I'd believe it.
Like, it might be that you literally are just splashing Thraben and Toolcraft Exemplar.
I don't think I would splash that because it's on the wrong direction, right?
But it might not be.
Splashing things that cost like 4 or 5 makes sense to me. Splashing things that cost 1 don't make very much sense to me.
Dude, it's a great play for 1 mana.
No matter what point of the game, yeah, I agree. But
it's like a 2/2 pirate because you're giving it +1. All right, what about the other one though? Dusk Legion Dreadnought.
So,
nah, this one's just generic. Forget it. I don't know, man. Either way, there's a lot of dope stuff so far. And is there anything else you wanted to hit here? Because I mean, I think that we've got so much that it's kind of like we got to try to figure out how to put all the pieces together. I think that we've hit on a bunch of build arounds, and you can't use all of them in the same deck. I think over the course of the next week, I'm going to be really looking for the nuts and bolts cards and trying to figure out how to see what of these build-arounds actually has the support for it, you know?
Yeah. But until then, we're Top Level Podcast. I'm MichaelJ Flores.
I'm Patrick Chapin. Thanks for joining us every week. And you can follow us on all the places that Flores loves to tell you about every week. You can share us on social media because that's pretty sweet. You can follow us on the Twitter and the YouTube and the Instagram, all of that. We got all that. And in particular, Patreon, helping make it possible for us to come to you every week.
Yep.
And in particular,
Patreon would be awesome. In particular, we'd like to thank Kobe Keller this week. Thank you, Kobe.
Thank you, Kobe.
Patrick said it all. Follow us, love us. And
no, dude, you can do whatever you want on that front. But we love you anyway.
Yeah, we do love you.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, so jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis days. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind.